You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, unnominated by the British Podcast Awards for a record 7 years. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we have been watching Clues. It was written by Bruce D. Arthurs and Joe Menosky and directed by Les Landau. It first aired the week of February 11th, 1991. James, what happens in this one?
The Red Dwarf crew wake up 4 days after celebrating the anniversary of Rimmer's death, only to find they've got no memories of the previous 4 days.
No, James, that's not what we watched.
Has it been no? It's not the episode where they forget everything that's happened and use clues to work out what happened.
It is that, somebody had a broken bone and they didn't remember how they got it. Yeah, it is that episode, but it's the wrong show. You're on the wrong show.
And then Geordie finishes the jigsaw puzzle.
More or less, yeah.
Oh, this is Next Generation.
Yeah, this is the Next Generation's.
The Clues episode.
Yes,
okay,
it's that
that makes sense. Okay. The Enterprise gets pulled into a wormhole while investigating an unusual M-class planet. The crew are all knocked unconscious and Data informs them that they were only out for 30 seconds. But some things don't add up. The M-class planet has disappeared. Dr. Crusher's moss samples have grown, and Worf has a broken wrist and has no memory of breaking it. Picard suspects Data isn't telling the truth about the incident, and he appears to be blocking the investigation at every turn. Could it be that they were out cold for longer and Data is under some alien influence? Or did the writers just watch Red Dwarf's Thanks for the Memory and figured that would do?
Well, Alex, you'd never seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
I've definitely seen Thanks for the Memory. We've podcasted about it before. I mean,
it's true.
I mean, yeah, let's just run that into the ground. But yeah, it is that episode. Although, it's
Chris Barry picked up the phone to his lawyers, but then he laughed.
Well, we've talked before about episodes that have a similarity with an episode of Red Dwarf. Normally, Star Trek has preceded it, and then we've said, did Rob and Doug see that episode perhaps and nick the idea unconsciously? This is this the first time going through this that we've had something that is so fundamentally the same as an episode of Red Dwarf, where Red Dwarf precedes the TNG episode? I think it might be.
Yeah, I think it is. I think very much earlier in the run, so it couldn't be coincidence that this is the one that really, in all of the runs of both those shows, this is the one that stands out as being
identical.
Yeah, this is exactly the same idea.
I mean, we probably should explain what the episode Thanks for the Memory is for anyone that doesn't watch Red Dwarf. We assume that everyone watches Red Dwarf, but
I feel that's not true at all.
No.
Well, it was Red Dwarf's attempt to do a whodunit when there's only 3 people alone on a spaceship and they're millions of miles from any other civilization, and so they wake up with no memory of what's happened and everything is a bit strange. A jigsaw puzzle has been completed,
Lister's leg is broken,
and just various things don't fit.
And then they slowly piece stuff back together by going through the black box recordings. So Data's the black box.
We never want to say somebody's ripped off an idea. I guess it's still a generic kind of mystery whodunit style idea. It's a procedural sort of episode, but it does feel very, very close in many, many ways.
To be fair, Red Dwarf would not have had wide airing in America at that point. It was on PBS, so it wouldn't have got huge ratings.
No,
I'm not even sure it was on PBS by this aired in 1990, so it would have had to be on air by 1989. I don't even think it was on PBS in 1989. I think it's just writers on both sides of the Atlantic dealing in a similar realm, albeit one's in drama and one's in comedy. But when you're looking with the same sort of set of toys to play with, you end up with a a similar result. Some of the coincidences are surprising, like the broken leg and in this the broken wrist, but I suppose when you're looking at physical evidence, physical harm to someone kind of seems a logical one to go to. But yeah, there's clearly a strong sense of deja vu for us going through this.
It probably is deja vu. It sounds like it. So I guess the episode starts. The crew again have finished their mission early, so they're enjoying their pursuits. Some of them are doing Worf's special Klingon martial art, but Picard, he is doing his Dixon Hill in the holodeck with Whoopi Goldberg because she was available for one day of filming at short notice.
Showing his start of penchant for outrageous accents.
But the thing is, it fits because he's on the holodeck.
Yeah. And he's not wearing an eye patch.
To be honest, it's never felt quite in character to me, Picard's love of Dixon Hill, but it is an established fact that that's something that he likes. And that's fine. And again, like we said with the last episode, it's a bit Route One, isn't it? It's, I like procedurals. I like reenacting these. Clues. Humans like clues. And we like solving the mystery. So fine. It sets that up in the very Star Trek The Next Generation way, where it's like, this is what this is all about. Let's go to the rest of the episode.
That is a point, actually, that we've never really talked about before, but Data and Picard's interests, one being Dixon Hill, one being Sherlock Holmes, in some ways they feel back to front. It feels like Sherlock Holmes would be more fitting for Picard, somehow.
Yes, I think so. I guess you can say he has that element of logic, but I can see Data having fun as a gangster because it lets him explore a side of humanity, whereas you could sort of say Sherlock Holmes is maybe a bit obvious because he's a bit almost like a sort of android himself, despite all the heroin and violin playing.
Well, it's whether ever it was a conscious choice to avoid going for Sherlock Holmes for Picard, but I don't know. I mean, you could say that there are, in some readings, perhaps too starker similarities between the two of them. But if you were to look at dramatic interpretations of Sherlock Holmes, I'd say you can draw a certain through line between Picard in The Next Generation and, say, Jeremy Brett's portrayal of Sherlock Holmes. Now, there's a comparison you're not going to get in a lot of other podcasts, mainly because it's laboured.
And I think as well, you also have Picard being quite high-minded, and although Sherlock Holmes is very popular and that lots of people love it, it's still regarded as literature in a way that pulp novels of the 50s and 60s would not be, and in a way I can't imagine Picard really sitting down to read a nasty, trashy noir, but I don't know what scale Dixon Hill's meant to be on. It seems to me it is really pulpy stuff. It's not the sort of high-end noir. It is like the absolute garbage that you'll find in sort of pulpy magazines. But
we had it in the Royale. He talked down that novel when he read through it. But I kind of like the idea that maybe a Dixon Hill holodeck program is much more high art in the future. From being this far away from it, it's seen as much more ancient in the same way we look at Sherlock Holmes.
I suppose it's the same gag as the classical music in Star Trek Beyond, where they're playing the Beastie Boys. It's that distance from it elevates its status as art.
I hope you're talking about the Beastie Boys and not Star Trek Beyond, which, to be fair, was fine.
So there's a planet, there's a wormhole, the ship gets sucked in. I've got to say, really love the model shots. It's so unusual, actually, to see the Enterprise not against completely black space. To have a bit of a nebula in there, it really makes the model shots stand out a bit. It makes it a bit more interesting. I like that.
You know what I want to ask? the way work is on the Enterprise. So they go to a planet and they have to do some survey or something, or they have to escort a diplomat, and then they're just going somewhere else and they're just doing nothing.
Yeah.
It just seems strange. I thought that part of the job of the Enterprise was to chart uncharted space. That, this ship had better scanning than any other ship in the fleet. So, they're in uncharted space a lot of the time. They have a job to do all around the clock.
And also, you would think people generally have a job to do all around the clock. It's this massive ship with 1,000 people on it. You would think a lot of people are always going to be working. It's not just like there will always be a bridge crew, for example, and there will always be people needed in engineering, and then you've got all the service staff and all the. I don't know what all the people do in the Enterprise, because it seems when required 2 people can run the entire ship, or 1. But yeah, you'd think it just generally needs a large number, probably at least a third of those, just to keep running.
I guess at times like this, they just take all of the puppies introduced in that, was it season 2 episode, that are now just massive feral dogs that everyone goes off to do karate or piss about in the holodeck while these feral dogs roam the ship. Feral, but quite well trained at computer consoles.
And is there sort of high demand on the holodeck at that point?
Yeah, it does seem that Picard tends to do block bookings. For a crew of 1,000 people, he seems to be in there a reasonable amount.
You say that, but that is actually a plot point in Star Trek Voyager.
Oh, Christ. Does he have captain's privilege? Can he overwrite someone's booking? Is it like a VIP area in a sort of piss poor nightclub where if someone more important comes in, they'll kick you out of the VIP area to replace you with anyone more famous than you are?
In the next generation of ships, in the Enterprise E, do you think he had his own holodeck in his quarters? Because that just seems unsavoury to me.
Well, he basically does in Picard.
Yeah, he lives in a holodeck.
Maybe the novelty of holodecks is worn off with most. Particularly with the amount of times it goes wrong and nearly kills you.
And plus, it must be a real pain in the arse that every second hologram achieves sentience, and you're just like, oh man, I just wanted to play a game. And now I'm having a debate about the nature of existence and what is life, and I didn't come here for the philosophy, I just came here because I wanted to shoot some people.
Also, just the clean-up, because clearly most of that crew are using it for shagging.
I mean, it's like any technology, ultimately that's what it comes down to, isn't it?
See also Craig Charles's routine on Dildonics.
A classic. I don't know why he's not still taking that around the scene. He should maybe do a gadget show special.
We got these 5 devices.
But yeah, on the holodeck, I suppose, before we move on from this, as we've wandered off on a tangent, I quite like that Data phones into the holodeck. I think that's a nice touch, a nice. I'm not sure particularly what it achieves, but something different, isn't it? He phones Picard's secretary.
It reminded me in respect of the Matrix.
He didn't have his comm badge on, did he? So he couldn't contact him directly. So the call was diverted.
You don't need a comm badge. Just the computer will shout at you, or an arch will appear, or whatever. None of them had a comm badge on during Generations, and they were quite happy to send the news that his entire family had burned to death.
To be fair, they were lucky to have comm badges at all, because most of them were wearing completely mismatching uniforms.
Ridiculous.
It's surprising they managed to find enough comm badges to go around. Just in the background of the shot, all the red shirts in the background, if you look close, it's not a comm badge, it's just a little McDonald's badge with 3 stars on.
But, given that Guinan is there at the start of this episode, and remember yesterday's Enterprise, where she was able to sense that a new timeline had been created and knew that stuff was wrong, Yet, nowhere to be seen in this episode where they've had their memories erased and their own personal history has been changed, and she has nothing to say about that in this one.
You would have thought at least, she would have had a bottle of gin or something, and it would be slightly lower than it was.
Oh, that must have been a nightmare, sorting the bar out. No one ever considered that. Or maybe she's stealing from 10 forward, and she has a problem, and so she doesn't want anyone to find out, so she thought it best not to mention it, that she's just blacked out behind the bar.
There is a lot of things that you don't consider. What about the dilithium crystals? They would surely be lower after a day of being used, and you can't just get new dilithium crystals.
No, I think there's a lot of things that they probably wouldn't consider. I mean, what if someone was, say, in the bath at the time? I mean, how'd you handle that situation? I mean, you have to get the temperature just right so they didn't suspect that anything weird had gone on.
Do the baths have like a temperature log? Maybe.
But or what if a couple were in a compromising situation, for example? Would you have to reset them to the exact moment of lovemaking?
No, just 30 seconds afterwards. Which,
that's fine.
To be fair, by that point they're down the corridor and having a cigarette.
When they get sucked into the wormhole and then wake up.
Oh, right, okay.
But anyway, they go out through the wormhole, and then Data says, "You've been asleep for 30 seconds. What are you thinking as a viewer? Do you think, well, that seems reasonable, we'll probably go off on another mission now? Or are you like, that's suspect, they could have been out for any amount of time?
Well, yes, but then at this point you have 3 potential plot strands. Karate, Dixon Hill, or a lapse in time. And that somehow I don't picture this being how Worf gets his black belt.
No, that's a future episode.
The thing is, I kind of think that the mysteries, or the minor mysteries as they're described, they're so boring. The planet disappearing, fine, that's okay. But then Dr. Crusher's moss, which has grown very quickly, it's just, that's the driver of the entire plot, and it's just like, I feel like most captains would just go, well.
Well, I guess here is a comparison you draw with that episode of Red Dwarf. The clues left in the episode of Red Dwarf are more interesting in terms of investing you in a mystery, because obviously there is a mystery, and therefore you want to be invested into it quicker, rather than debate, is it a mystery or is it not, as this episode spends a little bit of time doing. And the Red Dwarf clues in comparison, we have, as you say, the completed jigsaw, someone's leg is broken and has already been put in a cast, we have pages torn out of a diary. I would argue that invests you more in the mystery than this does. But then at the same time, this is trying to, as I say, play that idea of, is it a mystery? So it's trying to go for much more low key.
But I suppose the thing is that exact plot thing. The ship has meant to have been completely reset, and nothing is supposed to have changed. So the fact that there are minor clues at all, they're going to be minor clues. They're going to be tiny little details which just seem a little bit off.
I think it works better with Red Dwarf because the clues are kind of set up beforehand. So you think about Lister trying to finish the jigsaw puzzle. Maybe if in Next Generation they tied her into Dixon Hill, maybe. Like maybe Picard left the program running and then he goes back to the program and it's a day later.
That's good. Yeah, I like that.
And he thinks, there must be a problem with the program. I'll have Geordi look at it, and that's when, they start to piece everything together.
Yes, that is definitely more interesting than Moss.
I think a little bit of the problem, and I don't think it is a problem because I think this is a very well done episode, but in what we're discussing is in creating the mystery and the intrigue, is Data the problem? Because he's not affected, and then he has to act a bit shifty. But would it not be better if the aliens had tried to fix all the things and done a bad job of it, and then everyone's experiencing tiny little mysteries and not really understanding what's gone wrong because they've absolutely messed it up because they don't understand humans and they don't understand human culture.
Again, we kind of have that in Red Dwarf. The idea of the machine has been overwritten and has been put in a position where it's trying to, I was going to say deceive the crew, but not tell the crew about what's happened, because we have the same in Red Dwarf with Holly. And yeah, there is that problem, as you say, of having it be Data, because it's so clear kind of what's happening because of Data just stonewalling everything. And perhaps it would be more interesting to go down a route of Data can't recall, but can tell that there is something wrong. I don't know, it's difficult to know how you work around that. Data does feel like a problem here. Yes, I would agree. Which isn't to say that there's a massive problem with the episode. As you say, it's a perfectly good episode. It's good. It is good. It's just that we have seen another show do it, and I would argue probably do it better.
I guess it's someone has to carry the idiot ball every week, but Data is extremely suspicious in this episode. I don't think you would ever argue that he looks plausible.
They make it very obvious from the outset. They have the music over him, don't they?
Also, it's pretty clear very quickly that Data has been ordered by Picard not to tell Picard. So when you say about almost series 1 at points, I would say that is a sort of series 1 trope of knowing exactly what's happening quite a long time before the episode reaches it.
There's some other stuff like that as well, because Worf's broken wrist doesn't come into it till quite late on as well. They don't bring that element in, so it feels like we've got a long time where it's just the moss, and I'm sort of okay. It's just the moss then.
And yet they have O'Brien come in with an injury earlier on. Wouldn't it make sense that was Worf coming in earlier on?
Worf goes in the first one, and they'll say, well, that's your wrists evaluation done for another year, Mr. Worf. Fine wrists you've got there, no problems at all. And then there's the stuff with it's the internal chronometer and Geordi investigating, and the only person who could have done this is Data. Or me. I could have done it too. But Data. And it's, you've incriminated the guy we already know is guilty, and is saying, I can't tell you.
No, you see, I think that is part of the problem as well. And again, if we're talking about where Red Dwarf probably does slightly better than TNG does in this regard, when you're talking about, this sci-fi jargon has been affected by this time lapse, so we can tell because this sci-fi jargon doesn't look like this sci-fi jargon should look, is less meaningful than this diary is missing some pages. It's harder to invest in.
Yeah, that feels human, and it's when a chronometer and transporter waves and things like that don't match up, and it's all fairly solid sci-fi procedural stuff, and you're going to have that because it's Star Trek: The Next Generation. But it does feel like we should have more human things.
Something more tangible.
Yeah, it's like almost like a birthday cake's been eaten or something like that. It was my child's 7th birthday, and the candles have all been blown out and the cake's half eaten.
They could have had O'Brien and Keiko arguing over who ate the leftovers of their wedding cake.
Yeah, something like that. It just feels like there needs to have been something in that 24-hour period that is every day that has disappeared. But I guess it's quite an impenetrable future in some ways, and all of this shows this, that they're not living the same lives as us. So I guess the other big clue is Troy, who feels unwell an awful lot on the bridge.
She also gets overtaken in her bedroom an awful lot as well. I can think about 3 or 4 instances just off the top of my head.
Little beams of light that penetrate the ship seem to be instantly drawn to Councillor Troy, don't they?
Because she has the magic powers.
It's because she's so empathetic that she's so pathetic that she can she just identifies. The aliens just find her so relatable. Yeah.
And if they want to use Guinan, they could have easily used Guinan for that role, because she also has some sort of empathic powers.
I think it's good that they're using Troy for something, although it does feel like what they use her for is being possessed and having a terrible relationship with an alien who may or may not be manipulating her.
It's the fact that that's happened a few times now, and the fact that it always seems to come of the night into her bedchamber. That it feels icky somehow.
Yeah.
Not that something improper is happening, but that the writer has either not considered that or has considered it and gone ahead with it. Either way, it's yeah.
I think it's something that in the very early 90s they probably wouldn't consider.
Do they have to do that with her character because of her psychic abilities so it becomes meaningful? So if Riker looked in the mirror and said, "I looked and it wasn't me," would we just go, well, that's a bit funny, isn't it? But because Troy has these sort of magical powers, it's like, well, that might have some meaning behind it. It feels like a beat that wouldn't work with any other character, and it shouldn't really work with her, but it does because of what we've established in the past. But I can't imagine, Geordi doing that, mainly because he's blind, and I'm not sure how reflections work with his visor. But it doesn't feel like it would work with any other character necessarily, except maybe Guinan.
Yeah, which I guess we're getting into exactly what we were saying before about you have Guinan and then she doesn't crop back up. In some respects, to make more sense of tying the plot together, it would make more sense to have Guinan in that first scene and then have Guinan be the person overtaken and tie it all up somehow.
And I think the other thing about this episode is I think the best mysteries are satisfying on subsequent viewings. And I do enjoy this episode, and I do quite like it, but I think once you've seen it once, you're kind of... The stuff that's happening at the start is not intriguing enough, I don't think, to make you want to watch it again and again. Because it doesn't have the comedy elements, or it doesn't have those human elements, it's just like, I can't invest in the moss and the broken wrist.
Well, in some respects, you'd invest in the broken wrist more had it not just instantly been fixed. Again, that's something that I think Red Dwarf benefits from. The idea of you wake up and your leg is broken and in a cast. Whereas, oh, my wrist was broken, but it's fine. It's been fixed. Well, oh well. It's just, yeah, it doesn't have quite the same impact.
I also feel like the characters... They act very out of character in their treatment of Data. There's a lack of empathy for him as an individual, rather than just as a machine.
Yeah, like Picard saying, "Do you want to be stripped down to the wires?" Don't you know Picard loves Data?
That line in particular felt really off. It pushed into...
really sexy.
It pushed into, I guess you were... Well, it's kind of xenophobia, isn't it? You're into Alex Kurtzman era Star Trek there.
But I guess that was in the early stuff. But Picard was obviously, we'll fight for your rights and we'll get rights for machines. But that's
the point the character has learned since then, and he understands him as an individual.
I also think that in that first meeting where he sends Data out, in the least subtle way possible, I said you would help with the computer. Off you go. I mean, if somebody did that to me in a meeting, I would know they were going to talk about me and probably fire me. It feels a very inorganic. It's like maybe it could be more of a conspiracy and he has to call secret meetings and go, well, Data, he's not acting right, is he? And so inevitably we go back to the planet and encounter the aliens who are a green energy wave, and Data's still blocking for some reason, and until evil Counselor Troy arrives on the bridge. And it feels really weird that I guess talking about season 1 or even 60 Star Trek, that they go into a flashback. This is what happened. And it's not even like time coded. It doesn't look visually different or anything like that. It's just like, well, this is what happened yesterday. I think they could have made it more visually interesting.
I feel the whole end is a bit. I don't want to say anticlimax. Anticlimax seems wrong, but a bit of a damp squib, I guess. It's. I feel like the flashback goes on for quite a long time.
Yeah,
is one part of it, and then the other part is the reveal that what's responsible for this. Well, it's this xenophobic gas. It's this ball of gas that doesn't want any influence from anyone outside of its small parameter of interest, like Marc Francois. It's just, I mean, you hear it and you go, okay, fine. It's not that interesting, but fine. I guess it makes sense.
So you know about us now, and it's like, but nobody cares. Nobody cares about you existing. It's not like the planet has, you almost want there to be, it has this rare resource, it has this regenerative energy, maybe if you do insurrection, but it's just like, oh, we're here and we don't like people. And it's like, well, actually they wouldn't care. Just let them go.
And to draw the Red Dwarf parallels again, part of the reason that Red Dwarf succeeds more is that the reason given for the memory loss is much more intimate and related to the characters. So the whole resolution in the Red Dwarf episode is the idea that after a drunken night out, Lister decides to give Rimmer the memory of an ex-girlfriend, which Rimmer is fully invested in, thinks he'd had this massive lost love, and then discovers that it wasn't his in the first place. And the embarrassment of it means that everyone agrees to have their memories erased. So the resolution has much more of an emotional climax, but also just the fact that it's so intrinsically related to the characters. It feels so much more pleasing as a payoff than something that's nominally set up in the start of this episode of TNG coming back at the end, but it's not really, it doesn't tie to anything particularly. The most you get out of the character thing is Picard realising that he's the one who gave Data the order not to tell him. That's it.
As I've said, I think this is a perfectly good, solid, well-written, well-performed 50 minutes of television, and I think we've kind of destroyed it a little in this review, but...
Well, let's be fair. Were it not for thanks for the memory existing, we'd have been a lot kinder, I think. It's purely the fact of you having seen it done better elsewhere.
It's another sort of different format as well for the show. I think it's just demonstrated throughout this season how versatile the show can be, and this is them trying something a little bit different. Of course, they've done mysteries and procedural things before, but I think this one does feel a little bit, we don't know it's a mystery, is a neat idea, and I think within the parameters of TNG, it is well done. It's not badly done, certainly.
We're setting the bar higher for Next Generation now as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you know what it can do, and this is maybe it cruising. Although I imagine this was an absolute nightmare to write, but yeah, all good and solid, and I don't really have much more to say about it.
No, other than for one final note for the comparison with Red Dwarf. Again, for anyone unfamiliar with Red Dwarf, it is worth stating that I think we would regard the particular episode of Red Dwarf that we're referring to here as one of the best of the run. So the comparisons will therefore become a lot more stark. If it seems like we're being critical here in comparison to that, it's because that one is such a particular exemplar of what you can do in that format.
And if you'd like to hear more thoughts on that episode, why not search for The Garbage Podcast from Gazpacho Soup, available on all your usual podcast providers.
And to be fair to Next Generation, Red Dwarf was very influenced by Next Generation.
Oh, and it continues to be.
Stole from it liberally.
But in the early days in particular, Rob Grant was a huge fan and had videos of it sent over from America so he could see it, because it didn't air for a few years later in the UK.
That's about all we've got to say about that one for now, but we've got a few more points to make about the production in Quickfire.
Quickfire.
Now, we didn't talk about this, and I'm quite annoyed, but according to Memory Alpha, the book, The Red Dwarf Program Guide, notes that the story had an uncanny resemblance to an earlier Red Dwarf episode. Thanks for the memory.
You know, now that you bring that up, actually, it is quite similar.
At the start, Guinan talks about not really knowing what's going on when she goes onto the holodeck, and she talks about having been held up because she didn't know what to do with the suspenders. Now, given how much Picard is sort of dictating what she needs to come and say and do, etc., did Picard dictate that Guinan had to wear suspenders? I'm just looking to see if that is a question that Phil Farrand wants an answer to. But,
Here's my theory, that basically the computer program comes with a list of characters that you can play, and they also have a little replicator pack of the costume that you can wear to be authentic to that character. And that's what Guinan was given.
It would have been great if she came in with the tights over her hands. It is weird that the characters don't realise sooner that the planet has xenophobic aliens on, because it's a T-Tauri type star.
So this was based on a spec strip by Bruce D. Arthurs, and it was basically... Michael Piller thought it was a good show, but it was given a rewrite by Joe Menosky because the original script featured Will Wheaton as Wesley Crusher, and he was no longer available, and he also polished up the dialogue. Apparently, to differentiate the flashbacks from scenes set in the present, director Les Landau used longer and more fluid camera takes. Very well coded, because I didn't notice that at all.
They tried.
I think if you're going to be doing it in a TV show, and it's kind of a rushed, compressed time frame, I think you have to be a little less subtle than that.
You should have all the characters waving their arms and go doodle-doo, doodle-doo, doodle-doo.
This is the first time we've seen Worf's Mock Bara class. Looks fun. Well, that is us done for another week. Hopefully you can purge this from your memory as well. Next time we will be talking about First Contact. Oh, stuck in some terrible...
Our first retrospective episode in which we talk about the last 4 seasons.
Oh no. So be sure to join us for that one. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Just a scene of Worf in his quarters, checking to see if no one's around, unzipping his trousers.
This wrist is not doing what it did yesterday.
Worf would never do such a thing. Such an action would be dishonourable.
No, he just goes and fights Skeletor in the holodeck.
I wonder if Klingons do actually have like a rule about masturbation.
Well, I'm sure Alex Kurtzman's show will explore that at some point.
I think that's one for Memory Alpha.
Memory Beta, I think.
Is there a fan fiction one? Like Memory Theta or something like that?
Oh, sorry, I just realised Memory Beta. I didn't realise that. Yes, sorry. I thought that was a genuine thing. I've just realised that was a wanking joke.
That's very good.